With the astounding success of the Resident Evil 4 remake, and the astounding success of the Resident Evil 2 remake, and the Resident Evil 3 remake existing, many people have begun speculating about whether or not we'll be getting a Resident Evil 5 remake. In this video, I have decided to explore the question of whether or not it needs one. My personal opinion on the influx of remakes in this industry over the past few years is that there's too many. I want new games with new ideas and new stories. However, I really didn't think Resident Evil 4 needed a remake. It's one of my favourite games of all time. But I think that it is fair to say that the remake did make the game better, and this does beg the question of whether a remake could bring some love to Resident Evil 5. A game I honestly did enjoy quite a bit. So first of all, I've noticed this game isn't considered to be one of the stronger entries in the series, but at the same time, isn't spoken with the same animosity as 6 seems to be. I'm gonna just say this. I don't necessarily see how you could enjoy Resident Evil 4 and then hate 5. Sure, you can say it's not as good. Hell, it's not even close. 4 is far and away the best in the series, either the original or the remake version. But the combat in 5 is so similar to the combat in 4 that I don't understand how you could love one and hate the other. It's a much weaker entry, of course, in pretty much every other department. Story is worse. Pacing is worse. Setting is worse. It's all around a worse game. But it's not a bad game. Capcom smelt something special with Resident Evil 4. They smelt money. They'd leaned away from survival horror and leant into action horror. So how did the series evolve with Resident Evil 5? They just ditched horror completely. It's just action. There may be a creepy moment or two that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but nothing about this game is remotely scary. The game released way back in 2009. Third-person zombie shooters were sweeping the industry. Everyone was trying to emulate the success of the Call of Duty series as well. So Resident Evil 5 is just action. Is it great? No. Is it fun? Yes. Blasting through waves of zombies with a friend is always fun. Imagine Resident Evil 4 in co-op, with less interesting characters, a less interesting setting. That's the game. On paper, you'd want to play that. And that's essentially what it is. Ammo isn't really an issue, neither is health. There's plenty of ammo and health items to go around. The aim of the game is just gunning down the enemies. The bosses are cool in spectacle, but not necessarily in design. I mean, what the hell is the one where you're stationary on the back of the Jeep just shooting the Gigante from Resident Evil 4? That's very bad. Also, for a co-op game, I don't think that enough of the bosses require teamwork. There was the one where you need to burn the thing with the flamethrower. Strategizing with your partner helps there for sure, but other than that, I can't think of any necessity to work together. It feels like they just dropped the second player in so they could have co-op, not like the game was built around it. Obviously, the game wasn't necessarily built around co-op, so this criticism isn't really a problem unless you planned on playing it co-op. But that's how I played it, so that's how I'm going to think about it. Let's quickly talk about the setting. Resident Evil in Africa doesn't really sound great on paper to me, and it isn't. Everything looks so drab, the colour palette is uninspired, the game isn't very pretty to look at, and I don't necessarily think that can be attributed just to the fact that the game's 14 years old. I think it's because it's just drab, definitely wasn't a high point. Then we have the story. Now, I'm not one to take Resident Evil stories seriously because I firmly believe that there isn't a single game in the series with a necessarily good story. 4 and 7 have decent stories, but I don't think they're anything special. 5 is just filled with plot contrivances and predictable twists. Spoilers coming up for the story now, skip to this time to avoid. I have warned you now. It is so unbelievably obvious that Jill is the person behind the mask. I don't know why they even bothered hiding her identity at all. She's also completely wasted in this game. She should have been in it much more than she was. Wesker is a cool villain all in all, erratic chaos, serves as the typical action game bad guy, and does it well, all things considered. Shiva was honestly pretty boring in my opinion. I can't remember all too much about her. I've also never really understood Chris Redfield. He is just so boring in almost every single game he's appeared in, other than Village. He's literally the epitome of generic action man. He's boring. I assume that this is a hot take, and I apologise sincerely if you disagree, but I just do not see the appeal at all. Compare any game Chris is in with Leon in Resident Evil 4, for example. He doesn't have the charisma, the banter, the personality that Leon does. Obviously, I don't expect him to be Leon, that would be stupid, but I expect him to at least have some defining characteristics. They did this in Village. He's got a much more mysterious aura around him, and it works. But yeah, in Resident Evil 5, he's just bland, just like most of the other characters. And that's kind of where this game falls flat. It's just bland. There's nothing special about it. It's riding on the success of 4 whilst diluting everything that made that game great. Exceptional pacing? Not here. Charismatic protagonist? Not here. Invigorating boss battles? Not here. Intriguing setting? Not here. The appeal of replaying the game? Simply not here. I enjoyed my time with Resident Evil 5, I really did, but it feels like it's trying to be everything other than a new Resident Evil. With the action-heavy pacing, it's trying to be COD. With the ridiculous set pieces, it's trying to be Uncharted. And the moment-to-moment gameplay is lifted clean from the skeleton of Resident Evil 4. Retrospectively, it lacks the personality that makes the better entries in the series so great. And whilst it is a fun game that I could definitely recommend if you were to play it cooperatively with a friend, I can't say it's all too impressive to stand up on its own. However, I actually think that most of the more prevalent issues with this game could be fixed in a remake. If you asked me a few months ago whether I wanted a remake of a game from 2009, I'd have said no. Just leave it. It's there if you want to play it. But I said a very similar thing about Resident Evil 4, and that remake is some of the most fun I've had in a game in a long time. So I would say that Resident Evil 5 doesn't need a remake, but it could definitely benefit from one. So I wouldn't be entirely against one happening, as long as it doesn't impact the next mainline installment of the series after Village. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. I hope that you did enjoy it. If you did, then please make sure to leave a like, as that would greatly help me out. And if you want to see more videos from me, then you could always subscribe, because then you'll get to see more of them. But for now, that's all. Have a nice day, and goodbye.